Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the second session on the unit that we've started last week, which is Introduction to Cybersecurity. Before I start, I just want to, clarify on some housekeeping tips. Just making sure that you're able to join online. Please make sure you join by signing in with your name, and also when you're not asking questions, please keep your mic muted. You can ask me questions during the session as and when it comes to you. That's absolutely not a problem, and you can do so by chat or enable your mic and then ask me the query or the question there. I'll try my level best to answer and also provide you additional information during the session. If I can't do so, then I'll probably provide that information additionally just after the session via email, and some of the links and other bits would also go up on Moodle. This presentation, as always, has been uploaded onto Moodle. This is available as LO2, and you should be able to get access to it when you log in to the learning platform. Now, before I start the session, let's quickly go over and look at the indicative content that we are looking at covering. So I'll switch over to the unit specification. And if you look at this, this is what we looked at starting last week when we discussed about what is cybersecurity, what is the importance, why this as a field is now gaining more importance, and obviously looking at bits and pieces where in the key terminology we covered things like what are hackers, what is cyber, what is security, and why cybersecurity is important both for individuals as well as for organizations. The mindset of hackers. We looked at understanding the different types of techniques through which hackers actually gain access to your information, and what are the uses through which what tools and techniques that they use to basically gain access to that information. And finally, in the culmination of learning outcome 1, we looked at what are the advantages that hackers get by actually doing and engaging in this activity called hacking. So the first learning outcome, nicely, though it was quite a big learning outcome because it had some, 7 assessment criteria, we covered most of them from a point of view of looking at individually and then getting into detail, which is what now leads us to get into discussion with learning outcome 2. Now, in learning outcome 2, we are essentially focused on understanding how do we keep safe, how do we keep ourselves safe online. And the predominant, part in terms of understanding this learning outcome is online. The key word essentially is online. So essentially, we are going to be looking at when you go online, when you're using social media, when you're working from home, or say, for example, you're browsing the internet, you're doing some activities related to banking or any such activity that you do online and which requires you to go online in terms of usage of the internet. How do you generally keep yourself safe online? So when you do blogging, when you are, say, for example, social networking, using some of the social media apps that we all use nowadays, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, lots of different apps which are available. So we look at, on that aspect, understanding and trying to build our knowledge and skills around what generally means, what do we generally mean by saying, how do we keep ourselves safe online? Now, in this particular learning outcome, there are 4 assessment criteria. We're going to be looking at understanding things like methods of keeping safe online when using social networks. So that focus is on social networks. Then it talks about, it asks us to discuss how social networks create your personal brand, because there are good points to it as well. So obviously we'll be looking at how do various social networking sites help you to create your personal brand. Then we look at how do you protect your reputation online. This is something that we've read and seen and obviously heard in the news a couple of times. Online shaming, online reputation. Why is it important for companies, individuals to have a very good online reputation? When you look at the process of companies, businesses gathering reviews, when you look at the process of you being tagged, geotagging as we call it, or photo tagging, which is done with your friends when they post content online. So how do you look at protecting your reputation? So we look at some of the and discuss some of the things on that side. Then we have something which is called explaining the methods of keeping safe online in general. How do we go about and what practices, what best practices or habits we should develop, which allows us to actually keep ourselves safe online. Now, there's a fair amount of indicative content that we need to cover with each of these assessment criteria. They are predominantly listed in the subsequent pages on the indicative content, and I have brought that over to the presentation. So let's look at dwelling into the presentation and do a bit of discussion with regards to this particular learning outcome, which will focus on understanding how do we keep ourselves safe online. Now, the indicated content talks about social content, personal brand, what considerations that we could actually bring in when we are trying to build our personal brand using social media networks, how do we protect our online reputation, and obviously in general and towards the end, understand some of the methods that can help us keep safe online when we are using the internet or doing some transactions or internet or e-commerce related activity when we use apps and other bits on our PCs, Macs, various devices online. Now, let me begin today's session by showing you a bit of a short clip, which is a video clip, which essentially would put things into a bit of perspective for us, because what we want to be able to do is the central theme being how do we keep ourselves safe online, or safe online means safe on the internet when you're browsing the internet. So let's look in to this particular video, which will essentially help us understand the whole of the learning outcome in a bit of a summary. So let's look at and hear into this particular video.
Increasingly, the internet is becoming more and more part of people's everyday life. Many important public services, business and retail functions are moving online, something that poses tremendous challenges for those of us that, for one reason or another, have not grown up with the internet and lack the digital skills that many others take for granted. Beyond the technical challenges, the internet can be a very scary place, with constant stories on the news about malware, viruses and cybercrimes. But it's important to realise that it doesn't need to be. Following a handful of basic rules can make the internet a much safer place. In order to understand why the internet can be difficult for governments to regulate, you first need to understand a little bit about what it is. The internet is essentially a massive network of networks, each of which contains many interconnected computer or digital devices. Of these networks, by far the largest is the World Wide Web, and this is what most people are talking about when they discuss the internet. Each individual device or node on this web has the potential to connect to any other throughout the network. This means that many of these nodes may be situated in countries that have different legal standards, or which may not have the resources or capability to work with your local law enforcement organizations. To compound this, because the web is a network, there is no practical limit to the range of connections that can be formed within it. Any single node can route content to any of the others, making it almost impossible for authorities to completely block access to any specific part of the web. This is actually one of the web's greatest strengths, but the same factors that prevent governments regulating free speech throughout the internet also prevent them providing most of the legal protections that you take for granted when shopping or doing business on the high street. A useful analogy here would be shopping at a marketplace or garage sale, somewhere you aren't familiar with. In most cases, you are very safe, but you can't assume that this is the case. If something goes wrong, you can't just assume that trading standards will ride to the rescue and that you'll get your money back. You need to make judgments for yourself as to the trustworthiness of those you are dealing with.
So as you can briefly see, this particular video helps us understand the basic fundamentals of, why is it important for us to keep safe online. Now, obviously, there are loads of things which have been covered in this particular video, and we are going to go into a bit more detail that will allow us to help understand, some of the bits that we would want to understand with regards to this learning outcome. So let's begin with looking at, the first assessment criteria. Now, the first assessment criteria here talks about, understanding basically methods which will allow us to keep safe online, specifically using the social media networks. Now, when we talk about social media networks, I'm pretty sure that all of you understand what do I mean by saying the word social media networks. So when I say social media, we look at things like Google+, you look at Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you look at Pinterest, Twitter, there are so many of them, Snapchat. These are basically applications or, let's say softwares or essentially now, let's put it this way, services which allow you to remain in touch with your friends and family, and you can, obviously interact with them through a variety of ways using sharing photos, updates, posting on their timelines, something in terms of following them up or having a news feed on your site, so on your login and things like that. So essentially, social media or social networking service, as we call them, SNS, allow you to interact with your friends and family or anybody in general in terms of networking that you would want to do. Now, LinkedIn might be a professional way of networking with individuals primarily because you would want to have your social networks different for personal and professional space. And similarly, you'll have Facebook, which will be predominantly on the social side, which is personal, and you would have your friends and family on there. Now, when we look at social networks, we need to understand very clearly what do I mean by social networks. So social networks are all these applications which allow you to interact and network with your friends and family for various purposes and reasons. Now, when we look at why we need to be keeping ourselves safe online when we use these networks is because, or these applications are because they create, compile, and distribute information about you and your activities in general to anywhere in the world using the internet. So basically, these are, if you create a post or you write a blog, you write an update, all this creates a permanent print or an impression, and your message, your post, your blog remains online on the cyber, in the cyberspace forever. So essentially, at some stage, people can also get hold of this information even if you are archiving your, post, or if you have, enabled some of the safety settings on your post and things like that. People can still get access to, these posts that you make online. Now, some of these can be controlled through settings that you do in your social media applications, but there are obviously ways through which people can get past it by looking at diving into archives and things like that, which still allows them to get access to the post or information that you post online. Now, one of the studies which has been done by Statistica basically, looked at that there are 50 million Facebook users in the UK. There are, it's a recent report which basically updates in terms of how people are using, let's say, social media in the UK. So they classified that there are 50 million users on the Facebook, there are 30 million users on Instagram, and then about 16 million users on Twitter. Now, this creates lots of opportunities for people to be able to create content, distribute content, and post content online. Now, this also has your personal information tagged into it. So it's important, essentially, for us to understand that, at some stage, people can get access to this information with or without your knowledge, because this information is predominantly residing on the internet. And when this information falls into the hands of people who are not authorized to have access to this, that is when we look at the process of, that is where the process of actually safety net kind of things come in. So you don't want this information to fall into wrong hands, which could be used by people for fraudulent purposes, for making benefits from it. And that is why it is essential for us to be able to keep our information that we post through social media networks online safe. Now, how do we do this? There are basic things that you would realize that we do pretty much on a day in, day out basis when you use emails, for example, or when you log into apps or websites where you access your information. And some of these basic things that allow us to keep ourselves safe online would be things like, sometimes what happens is all of us have Sky or Virgin at home. And if you try and log into the account, sometimes you forget your username and password. What you do is you go onto the website, and what you do is basically forget your password. The website does not straight away allow you to log in, but it sends you an email. It asks you for your username, or it'll ask you for an email address. And if that is detected and matched up with the server and the database on the system, then you get a reminder or an email link to be able to reset your password. Now, that is being created primarily to ensure security, that people do not get unauthorized access to the account or get access to accounts which they are not authorized to or are not their accounts. So essentially, practices like resetting your password or choosing a strong password. I think most websites now or most locations, applications online now ask you to have at least a minimum 8-character password with a combination of alphanumeric and special characters in your password. Now, gone are those days wherein obviously you could keep a very simple password, which was just a normal text or a number. But essentially, websites now have the ability to be able to, give you some suggestions that this password is weak, is medium, or it's okay, or it's very strong. And this deters people to be able to get access to your account from a very simple technique, which is using strong passwords. Now, sometimes it is advised that if you have passwords, we've got into the habit of saving passwords on our browser. We normally use 1 or 2 passwords, but obviously as a general good practice or as a best practice, it is always recommended that you have different passwords for different sites, so that if one gets hacked, that does not mean, the hackers or people who get access to the information can get other access to other accounts by using the same password. One of the other things that you'll also notice that we do specifically with banking or some of the e-commerce related site is that if you forget your username or password, they normally ask you to add security questions. And the reason of adding these security questions is to add another layer of security to your login credentials so that people cannot get access to your media accounts or social media accounts. We use applications now on smartphone devices, and again, one of the key things which is recommended is when you look at some of the latest phones today, they have fingerprint enabled on it. They have biometric fingerprint security. Some of them have facial recognition. So obviously, in those cases, if your devices get lost, and if it is facial recognition or fingerprint security enabled, that deters again people to get access to your social or online accounts. And sometimes some of the best tips tend to be that you have to be selective with friend requests. If you know somebody or if you trust somebody, then only accept their request. Make sure that you exercise caution, which is while clicking. We have got into the habit of clicking onto the sites. If you're trying to find information, what we do is sometimes we blindly click on a lot of sites, and this is called a clickabait. So I don't know whether you've heard this term clickabait, but essentially what this term means is there are lots of these sites which try and get revenue from advertising. And what they try and do is they try and promote a lot of clicks. So they'll post an information that you like. When you click on that site, it actually takes you to a rerouting site, which will be an advertising site. So you visited that site. From there again, you'll be asked to click. You'll go another site, and then from there go to another site, and finally lead, after a few clicks to the site where the information is actually residing. So you have to sometimes exercise clicking with caution when you're online, and that also allows you to stay safe, specifically because in those cases, some of these sites, when you click on, are trying to use the key on the site to gain access to your information, which is in the public domain from your browser, things like your username, what is the IP address of your machine, where are you located, where are you browsing from, and all these things can be, actually gathered just by going onto the site, because you've accepted a cookie, and that allows them to also then start sending you emails, phishing emails, and things like that. So make sure that you click with caution when you're online. Sometimes you have to be very clear that you need to be, familiar with people to share information. You're not supposed to reveal sensitive information like your financial information, banking, phone number, and things like that if you're not sure of the individual. And in some cases, before you even click and accept cookies or go on to certain sites or sign on to certain sites, you have to ensure that you've read their privacy policies, wherein some of these sites then use this data and aggregate it and sell it to third-party agencies for advertising revenue or generating revenue from advertising, sharing information, or also for marketing and promotional purposes. And sometimes you'll suddenly realize that I've signed on to a particular social media network, but I've started to get a lot of emails which have never been to those sites. And the reason why you've started to get those emails is because you've accepted the privacy settings and have not gone into details to read that. And that means that allows, when you click allow, that allows that website to gain access to your information and then also share it with third party or other similar sites for the purposes of advertising and promotion. And one of the most common things that we do in terms of trying to save online is we've heard about broadband shield or, some sort of a firewall. In some cases nowadays, when you use your hardware, what we also need to be able to do is try and install certain sort of softwares which allows the malicious sites, phishing sites, emails to not gather such information, and that is done by using antivirus softwares or also keeping some of these softwares up to date. So when you get an update on your browser, when you get an update on your Windows or your Mac, you should be looking at updating it, because here the vulnerabilities which have been detected by the company or by hackers, by ethical hackers, and the company working with them is now trying to patch those vulnerabilities so that people do not get access to your information when you're going online. And one of the last things which I would mention, which is very, very common that we do, is that you've gone onto a site using a public machine, you've accessed your email or your Gmail or Hotmail, and what you do is without logging off, you straight away just, what you do is you straight away basically just go on and essentially what you do is you close the browser. You're actually not logged off from the site. So what tends to happen if somebody else tries to log in and use in the same machine when it's a public, a PC or a terminal in a public place, what tends to happen is they straight away open your email or your Facebook or your Twitter because you've not signed out. So one of the common mistakes that we do is we need to be able to always remember to log out from the sites that we've logged in if you're using devices which are shared amongst various members in the family or essentially, in the office or in any sort of a public place. So these are some useful tips that we can use primarily to stay safe online when specifically using, social media networks. Now, there's an additional reading article which I put, which is primarily on the .gov website. And this particular article that you can look at would also tell you, more tips how to stay safe online when specifically using, social media networks. And that would be, essentially will add to some of the more information that you've gone through with me on this session. Now, let's go into the second assessment criteria, which is looking into describe how social media networks allow you to create, what you call personal brand. So in this case, basically, what you have to look at is that when we look at, social media, we are basically using this as a channel to put out information about us, my thoughts, my processes, and, your personal brand out there. So one of the reasons why we look at now having a profile online or any of the social media networks is because you want to actually take control of your brand and obviously interact and network with a lot of individuals which might have similar ideas and similar thoughts, and obviously will be maybe from the same sector or from the industry, and it could be for various personal or professional reasons. So when we look at social media networks, basically, if this is a bit of marketing that we need to understand, is that brand management is as important when you do it online or when you do it offline. So when you see adverts in magazines, when you see, essentially any sort of adverts which have come in wherein the brand, like Starbucks, for example, as a company is trying to advertise its coffee brand, and, or any other brand, for example, like if you look at Amazon today, they're advertising on TV. And, that is all being done to enable and further the message of the company that buying online is very simple, all products are available. And what they're trying to do is using the brand messaging in terms of the simplicity to click and collect, in terms of how you can order, how you can get the stuff delivered to online, order online and then get it delivered to your home, is all the process through which Amazon is furthering their brand by, advertising it using television advertising. Now, similarly, some of these brands also advertise online. So when you go to social media sites, internet sites, you would normally see some banners and, headline banners or, big banners on the left, right, small pop-up windows coming up. And these are all being used as companies to basically do marketing. some part of this marketing can be essentially brand-led. So similar aspects of this, if you utilize and use for your personal reasons when you create a profile on different social media networks like Facebook, like LinkedIn, Twitter, you look at Instagram, you look at, other networks. There are lots of these paid network sites as well on which you can create accounts. And if you subscribe, if you pay for a particular service and then use them to further your business, your, services, your, content or whatever you're writing, then what you're using is essentially using the social media networks to basically create a personal brand of yourself online. Now, one of the key important things that I would like to point out is William Arruda, which is, he's defined or he's termed as a personal branding guru, and he's written a number of books. Is in one of his books, which is Ditch, Dare, and Do, 3D branding for executives. He basically says that if you want to be successful, you need to think of yourself as a brand. And, today people, as you know, are making money through Instagram, through Facebook, through lots of these social media services, Snapchat and things like that. And the reason is, why do they want followers? Why do you want a lot of people to follow you, network with you and things like that? The reason is they are trying to monetize the content that they post, monetize, say, for example, or make money from. When you look at YouTube, for example, a lot of companies have YouTube channels, a lot of people have YouTube channels, they're influencers as they are called. And what they're doing is they're broadcasting themselves, their thoughts, or maybe talking about an important topic, subject. And if followers follow them, they watch the video, what is happening is they're monetizing what they're broadcasting out there. And that is because that personal brand essentially, they are being searched more than some of the others online, and that allows them to monetize and obviously, make money from it. So there are advantages of using these social media networks, and they can help you propel or, project your content, whether you do it through blog, it's called blogging. Then there is something called video blogging. That means you broadcast yourself on Facebook, Twitter, or, YouTube. There are lots of events that you can host. And depending on how you put that content out there, then what you would be, required to do is basically what you're doing is you're creating your personal brand. And what it is doing is allowing you to make money, from the social media networks. Now, there are certain tips through which you can actually make money online, or you can create your personal brand online. And what I've done is I've put in some basic bullet points which allow you to understand how you can create your personal brand online. And there are some additional articles which I've recommended that you should go out and read, which will give you some more details in terms of why, personal brand, or for example, people can create personal brand using their presence online. Now, this particular article is by Digital Media Institute, which is considered as one of the leading institutions providing, training on, digital marketing and digital marketing related courses. And I've taken some points from their blog, which essentially provides us some tips in terms of how you can create your online personal branding. So typically, because it is talking about how do you, look at creating a personal brand using social media accounts, first step would be to choose your accounts, which accounts you want to post information on, which accounts you want to have, subscription on. You need to be able to define your area of expertise. Say, for example, I'm in education, so I would like to post content on education areas related to jobs, careers, progression on education. So you need to find your area of expertise, which allows you to, put out content which is original, which is something which you have knowledge on, and you should be able to then, let's say, talk about it in depth. Then sometimes you have to use, some of these channels to be able to post your content online. That means to put out your content, and that can be done using applications, websites. For example, if you look at Twitter, Twitter allows you to post your comment in about, say, 140 words. If you look at Facebook, you want to put out larger content in terms of blog posts and things like that, you have to use different platforms or applications. So blogging platforms, there are other platforms which allow you to post what you're trying to post on Twitter. It can also be posted on LinkedIn, Facebook. So there are lots of applications which allow you to post content on various sites that you've subscribed on. And that saves you the time and effort to post individually on all of these sites, but using the applications or softwares, post the same content online. one of the key things that people will, look at when you try and create a brand online would be to enhance and influence people to be able to follow you. So your content has to be very relevant. It has to be something which has to be striking a chord with them. It has to be that you have to post regularly, so that it's like unfolding a story, but you're basically posting parts of it online on a regular interval basis, which allows users to, come back and, seek out more of that particular content. Now you have to create and curate. Curate means you have to sometimes repost that content so that you're able to engage with users, and reposting of that content can be done in various forms. So for example, you write a tweet, which is like a headline for what you're trying to talk about. Then you write something about it on the Facebook timeline. After that, you write maybe an article on LinkedIn. And after that, what you do is you basically write a blog on your website. And that could be followed up with an email, campaign, which would go across to all your subscribers. And you could maybe even post a small video of that in terms of a short summary on YouTube. Now, this is what is creating and curating your content to engage with audience on different social media platforms. You might be writing and you might be talking about that content because you want to engage with users, but not all users are using YouTube, or not all of them are using Instagram, and not all of them are following you on Twitter. So essentially, you have to engage with the users on different platforms, and what you're doing is reposting, curating that particular content on different channels to be able to engage with more and more users, which allow you to create that following, and that following creates your personal brand. Now, there are lots of people that we typically look at following, and when we look at this particular aspect of it, sometimes what you do is you import contacts from your emails from different accounts and give access to LinkedIn, for example, or Facebook to be able to access your accounts on phone and things like that. But that is a strategy to build more audience or make more followers, and that is why you allow access. So that if you've written to anyone on an email in the last few years, but that is something which is not active, the social media account or service would actually like to access your account, get access to it. Sometimes you have to be careful in terms of, which emails or other bits that you're giving access to, but that's the idea of basically, building your network or, building the followers essentially. Then you look at, obviously the content that you keep, you have to be positive. The thoughts that you're putting in your content need to evoke, positive actions. It should not lead to some sort of negatives or, which would generally be shunned by people or would not like it. So in those cases, in order to build up your following and, create, let's say, people who will steadily follow you, interact with you, comment on your posts and things like that, you have to keep your comments, positive. You have to also look at joining and finding, groups, forums, accounts which will have like-minded individuals, which allow you to, obviously increase your network. Sometimes you have to also look at studying some of the other influencers, and these influencers, for example, when you look at, some of these that you study, what you will generally see is that they tend to be, quite, let's say, they tend to be following. So they tend to be, say, for example, following other individuals, which will allow you to get some ideas, and that would be, bits and pieces of how you would look at essentially use social media to create an online presence. Now, there are lots of influencers, and I say study influencers, and if I just do a quick Google and look at a couple of influencers, we can find a lot of influencers on, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, things like that. Now, if I look at the top 20 influencers on Instagram, just as an example, there are people which can be categorized into different sectors: beauty, entertainment, music, things like that. So if I talk about, influencers, for example, Lady Gaga, she's got a massive Twitter following, Instagram following, and she's, you look at Billie Eilish. These are people who have lots of people following them, and what they've been able to do over the years is create a personal brand, and that personal brand has happened because they are interacting with people online by using relevant social media accounts, and this allows them to make money or, obviously interact with a lot of individuals by just tweeting or, putting something out. So sometimes when you see, let's look at the recent Euro football, and what we saw was that a lot of, the England team taking the knee, campaign, which started off sometime in America against, discrimination. You see how some of these people are able to, influence and get the word out there, because they have a lot of people following them, and they have created a personal brand using social media networks that they use. And this allows them to interact with millions, thousands and millions of audience online globally, and get their word out there. So this is one of the ways through which you can look at, creating a presence online, or your personal brand online using social media networks. Now, in a couple of subsequent slides, what I've done is I've drilled down some of these tips that I've given in order for you to get into a bit more detail in terms of how do we do that. The nitty-gritty of this, it talks about describing. So obviously we can't just describe these by bullet points. For the purposes of assignment, you will need to cover it up with some more meat on the bones in terms of describing it in a bit more detail. And it's not explain, it's describe the command verbs, so you have to write a bit. And that is where I've given 5 detailed points to look at how you can actually create a personal brand using social media networks. So things like target the right audience, use the right social media channels, find out what is creating the buzz, what are people interested in, and look at monitoring the topics. If you can add to those topics, comment on those topics, do the research in order to understand what audiences you want to engage with, what social media channels you want to use. Check out your competition, because every individual is a brand and they are trying to get their word out there. They're trying to make money by creating a personal brand online using a social media network. So if you're going to be looking at monetizing it, then you have to check out your competition. And last but not the least, sometimes you have to look at using the right balance to reach the audience by using the right set of channels, because sometimes what you will do is, obviously you can't subscribe to all, you can't post your content and all. You have to choose the right channels wherein you are going to be able to find the audience and be able to engage with it. There's no point in, obviously an example is, if you have a business which you run and you sell stuff online, now it will be ideal for you to go onto Facebook, eBay, Amazon, and create your own store and engage with audience. Now, in order to build that up, you might advertise on Instagram, Twitter, and things like that. But you wouldn't probably do that on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a professional network, and you'd normally go in to look at opportunities of networking, job or career enhancement and things like that. So that won't be relevant. So that is why it is important for you to understand what audience you are targeting and what channels you are using to be able to, engage with them online. Now, the third assessment criteria that we want to get into and understand is explain how to protect your reputation online. So when we look at how do we protect our reputation online, what we are looking at here is understanding, the basic bits when we talk about, reputation online. What we mean by that is essentially, if I just look into the meaning of the word reputation, it basically means that, you're trying to essentially look at so essentially here what we are trying to do is basically understand how do we look at holding or basically protecting our opinions and beliefs, which essentially will allow us to let's say protect them from a point of view of being tarnished. So when we talk about reputation, what we are basically meaning is that this is a set of your beliefs or opinions that you generally hold, and what you want to be able to do is basically protect them from being tarnished. That means somebody can come in and object to them or adversely comment on them. So what you want to do is basically save yourself from that embarrassment, and that is where the question of reputation comes in. When we talk about reputation online, what we mean by reputation online is that essentially we are looking at, when you post things, when you post a photograph, you post a thought, you tweet something on different social media networks, what is happening is you're actually, putting your comments and opinions out there. So in some cases, when you look at putting some of these things out online, what can happen is that if you post a photo online, or for example, if you comment online and or maybe you put out something online which has been tagged by your friend or has now started has started a process wherein a lot of people are commenting on it because they find it funny, hilarious, serious, or they don't agree with those particular comments that you posted, then in those cases what will happen is that you would generally see online people would then be able to judge you. They would judge your comment, and in general you're opening yourself to be able to be publicly judged by people who are actually following you or are a part of your network. So in those cases, when you look at people judging you for something that you posted, or they agree with you, disagree with you in general, and then they start commenting on you. Now, in some cases, if this commenting tends to lead to negative thoughts or negative, let's say comments, then in those cases, it could harm your reputation online. So sometimes what we see is that the people would post something, and if they find that this was something which was offensive or was not liked by the audience, what they tend to do is go back on Twitter and delete that tweet. Now, sometimes deleting some of the content deletes it from your account, but does not delete it from the archive, and people can still get access to it. So it is always recommended, in order to protect your thoughts, your beliefs, your opinions, what you need to be able to do is be wise and mindful about what you're, let's say putting online. And that is predominantly being done to ensure that, you protect your reputation. So there are social media sites which allow some controls, privacy controls, which allow you to change the settings. But what you need to keep in mind is that today you've put on a tweet, maybe in favor of, say, let's say, I'll give you a particular example. We saw the recent conflict between Palestine and Israel, and obviously, the state of Israel, Palestine in general, Gaza, took a lot of pounding from the Israeli army. But some of the social media influencers like Gigi Hadid, or some of the people who actually come from that place, tweeted online to say that they don't support the actions of Israel. And what happened straight away after that was you saw that some of the companies actually started to withdraw contracts from Gigi Hadid, which she's a very famous model and is now in the US, settled in the US, and they started to withdraw contracts because, she tweeted something which was favoring the state of Palestine against the state of Israel. So what tended to happen was that because that promoted anti-Semitic comments or showed that she is supporting anti-Semitic content or comments in this case, brands like Michael Kors and some of the others that she endorses or is a brand ambassador for started to withdraw her name and, withdrew contracts from her. So you can have a lot of repercussion of what you say, which can go positive or become, negative and damage you as a brand online. And that is where the question of reputation comes in. So you have to be mindful in terms of what you, mindful and considerate in terms of what you tweet or what you put online, because sometimes some of these comments or, pictures or whatever you put out, like your opinions or things like that on blog can actually be compromising or damaging your reputation because in some cases, if you're a voice for a brand or you're a brand ambassador and the brand does not conform with the same, thought process, then that would mean that they could withdraw contracts. And in effect, what it is doing is basically damaging your reputation. Now, how do we, having understood that context, how do we go about, essentially protecting ourselves online? So let's look at some of the ways through which you can actually do if you are going to be looking at building a personal brand using social media networks. You're going to be trying to build followers. And in those cases, what you have to do is look at taking steps to protect your reputation online. Now, one of the things which people do today is they set up Google search words, and through which, if there is anything which gets posted about you, Google can actually tag them, and then you get emails which allows you to look at that content to see whether that is in, positive, that is creating a positive effect or a negative effect. And that allows you to look at safeguarding your reputation. Now, you would see a lot of media personalities, celebrities, actresses, actors. They have an agency which basically looks at managing their online reputation. So what they tweet, what they put out as content, for example, photographs and things like that, they're all carefully monitored in order to ensure that, it creates a positive effect on their followers and, elicits a positive reaction as against a negative one. And in some cases, some of these agencies set up, what is called the Google search words. Then you look at alerts. Sometimes you can also look at setting up alerts along with the Google search, which allows any information that has been, created or tweeted or essentially put out on the internet. Google Alerts can actually send an email, compiling them for you on a daily basis. And there is a way to create these Google Alerts if you have a Gmail account, and you can try and do this as an exercise, for yourself. And that would allow you to understand how you can use Google Alerts primarily to, monitor anything being published about you online, and that can be done using this. And this is given in, the section. If you hyperlink, this is hyperlinked, and I've left it like that so that you can go online and actually look at doing an exercise to create an alert, which would be about yourself, or maybe about a course, or maybe about a job that you're trying to look into, maybe an alert about the company that you're trying to apply to get a job. So you want to look at if the jobs come online, you can create a Google alert, and if they post a job online on their website, that would come in as an email to you for you to be able to easily apply and follow. Now, other steps which would be to look at using some advanced tools. There are lots of advanced tools, and some of these could be paid services, people.com, whitepages.com, and they will allow you to monitor, certain aspects of things in terms of, information being posted online about you, and you can create alerts which can then allow you to monitor whether they are creating or they are basically, hopefully not damaging your reputation. Now, sometimes you can also allow people not to tag you in pictures or, keep or save your information. And because of the Data Protection Act, GDPR guidelines, you can actually write to a company or a website, which then allows you to essentially to ask them to remove your information or not use it for advertising and promotional purposes. And that would allow some of the unnecessary information being put out on the internet to be removed. And that creates, less embarrassment in some cases, typically so common in the case of pictures. So a lot of people today, when they go out to pubbing and, Freedom Day after a lockdown, a lot of people have gone out, they've done a few silly things, friends have taken photographs and they posted it online on Facebook. And what happens is after somebody's posted it online, one of your friends tags you in the photograph. And if you feel that photograph is embarrassing or was taken without your permission, then you can obviously write and photo tag that, or use privacy settings to have that removed so that it does not compromise your reputation online. And one of the basic things that I would say to everyone would be, because you're looking at living, mostly because all of us have, we are living a virtual life as well, because we have online accounts and lots of services that we use on social media. So there is a part of that information which resides online, and I think all of us, in terms of maintaining your reputation and your image online, you have a moral responsibility to ensure that you share and comment, or you share, comment, or tag people with responsibility, and obviously somebody that so that it does not unknowingly or knowingly creates a harmful effect on having somebody's reputation. So in this case, think twice before you post. Think whether this photo needs to go online. Think whether you need to put this comment online. Think whether you need to add or tag a friend specifically in that picture, because that would create an impression, create a presence for you online. And if you do this as a general practice, that would, generally keep you in good stead and not harm your online, reputation. So these are some of the, steps that you can actually take to protect your information online. And if you follow these steps, these would be, helping you to do that. Let's go on quickly to our last assessment criteria in this learning outcome 2, which is basically explaining the methods of keeping safe when working online. So we've discussed a lot of aspects of, how to be safe online, and what are the practices that we need to do, or how do we protect our online information. Now, if you look at the COVID pandemic in general, for the last 15, 16 months, a lot of people have been working from home, WFH. That's a new term which has also been coined, WFH, working from home. Now, if you look at when you're working online and you're working from home, for example, and you're working online, how do you keep yourself safe? How do you ensure that the information that you're, putting out or sending is generally safe? So there are lots of things that we have to look at. And in this case, generally the concept of something called internet safety, online safety, cyber safety, or e-safety, all these words or connotations of the same, they all have same meaning. So when you say safe online or safe working online, basically we are all talking about cyber safety, e-safety, online safety, whichever way you want to put that out. But basically what we are doing is talking about safety. Now, essentially, when we look at internet, obviously it's a brilliant place to be able to connect with others, share things with others. Lots of different applications are available to be able to put out content, not just in the written form, blog form, video form, photos, things like that. Today we can post comments in any shape or form online. Now, on the same time, what we need to be able to do is also ensure that we are keeping ourselves safe and not exposing ourselves to vulnerabilities which people would want to, when I say people, I mean fraudsters, hackers would want to gain access to. And in those cases, obviously there have been lots of initiatives which have been started, by governments and by various agencies online, because the use of internet is growing and is growing enormously. Lots of devices are being connected. Everybody is getting access to the internet, and obviously it is important for us to also know how do we work online safely. So when we look at lots of different forums, we look at, SOCA, which is a serious organized crime agency, which basically monitors internet crime. We have Safer Internet Day, which is celebrated in February, and it is basically done in order to, look at promoting the concept of internet safety, for people who go online. And there are other various initiatives which different governments take and different agencies take, and they are done from an aspect of ensuring that people, when they are online, whether they are using it for personal or professional purposes, are able to keep themselves safe, from fraudsters, from hackers, or from people who want to gain access to the, gain unauthorized access to their personal and private information. Now, what are the various ways through which we can keep ourselves safe online while working specifically? So when you think of office, when you think of work, what do you use the internet for? What do you use the computers for? Ask this question to yourself. So, for example, when I use PCs online or a Mac online, I'm predominantly using it for work purposes, and that would be for sending emails, sending or uploading information on various channels like YouTube, learner management system. Sometimes it is to accounts like LinkedIn, Facebook, putting out some information and AdWords. I'm also looking at using it for banking. I'm also using it for example, sharing information online through creating Google Drive links, or, sharing data through Google Drive, Dropbox, things like that, which are network sharing or file database sharing services. You're streaming music online. You're using devices like Amazon Alexa or the Google speaker and things like that to basically get information, sometimes when you're at work. And also, most importantly, you back up your data online as well nowadays. So you're no longer keeping backups on hard drive. You're using cloud-based services to be able to back up your data. Your browser, for example, is saving a lot of your passwords. While you're at work, you fill some of the forms up, you go to websites where you have subscriptions and you regularly visit them. What you're doing is all these places are being used for work purposes. So if I log into an account, an awarding organization's account to register a student, I'm using a username and password. And sometimes if they are being stored on your browser, then obviously these are things which need to be secured so that nobody gets access to it or unauthorized access to it. So in those cases, you look at one of the key functions that we look at on most of the websites is the chat function. So sometimes you have a chat function which is available, and in those cases what you will see is if the chat functions are not secured or over the VPN, then in those cases, those chats are basically like open broadcast forums or open forums through which people can also get access to it, or chat rooms, they can get access to it. So all these things have to be secured. So when you look at some of these tools being used today, when people call, bank, and obviously if the lines are busy, they route you to say, okay, can you go online and do a bit of a chat with our customer services agent? So in those cases, you're using it for work, and in those cases, the network has to be secure, the chat room has to be secure, so nobody, apart from you and the customer services agent, can actually eavesdrop in your conversation and should not be able to see it online. So there are lots of different tips that you can look at and methods that you can dwell into to ensure that when you're working online, you're doing that safely and you're ensuring the integrity of that information is being is actually secure, so nobody else has access to it. Some of the things that I would quickly show you and say for example visually by transferring you to my browser. And what I would suggest is, one of the things that we need to make sure is that when you go onto certain sites, you see this padlock. And this is basically an example to show that this is a secure site. It has a service socket layer SSL certificate, let's say installed on it. If I go to say Barclays Bank, for example, you would generally see that the Barclays Bank website, has certain bits which basically would say that it is protected by, BSI standards, by FSCS, which is Financial Services, organization which basically protects it. It also has what is called a cyber skills certificate, installed on the website. So when, for example, you're generally on the website right now, but when you click on login to banking, which is the banking site, you would see Cyber Essentials logo, which comes in, which basically shows that this website is being monitored and it's digitally safe for you to browse and put information on it, because it is being done in secured servers or the company's VPN servers, so no such information can actually go out. So sometimes you would see that when you go onto sites which do not have the padlock or the SSL layer implemented, you would generally see Google would give you let's say a tip, or say for example it will bring up a notice to say this site is not safe, and it'll try and divert you from that site because of the fact that that site is considered to have some sort of, let's say it does not have authenticity established. It could have a malware on it, some sort of phishing software installed on it, and in those cases, those sites would normally steer you away, primarily from a point of view of looking at, not giving you a bit of a, let's say a reminder to say this site is not safe. Now, if I look at UK Versity site, we collect a lot of information. As you can see, it is asking you to accept a cookie, and if you click accept, obviously it will save some part of that information on the site. There are other cookies that we are allowing Nextrol as a company to collect, which is advertising information, and in this case, if I decline all, it'll obviously not collect that information. Now when you're on this site, as you can see, there are lots of bits and pieces of information which the site has, but what you will also see is in some of the pages of the site, you would see that you are generally going to see that in this case, there's a chat function which will come on, and in some cases when the chat function comes on, that allows you to have a chat with one of the customer services executives to be able to gain access to, say for example, information, ask questions, and that chat function, in general would basically be secured because we are using a software on it which allows us to make sure that there is, adequate security applied when you look at sites that you go onto and you're looking at doing a bit of chat with, rather than calling through the phone. You might be, based abroad, and in some cases when you're based abroad, what will happen is that the site would serve you better if you're able to use the chat rather than maybe make an expensive phone call. So some of these things have to be looked at when you're trying to work online. As you can see, padlock being implemented. Some sites, would not allow you to copy any content. As you can see, I am trying to right click on it. I can't set any content, as you can see. And, what it does is it does not allow the site people to copy the content from your site. So if you right click on it, right click is disabled. I'm trying to do it. If I'm trying to drag my mouse, as you can see, it doesn't allow you to copy the content. And this is again an additional feature to keep the content of the website safe online. So there are lots of things which companies can implement, and this would be some of the methods I've shown you by a literal demonstration to say that, okay, these methods can be used to keep the working online safe, specifically when you're using it for, work purposes. So I hope with this particular session, we have covered comprehensively the learning outcome 2, which is to understand how to keep yourself and others safe when working online. So at this stage, what I would like to do is end the session, and I would like to also invite any questions if you have. So feel free to ask me the questions, and a copy of this recording and the presentation is going to be available on Moodle shortly after the session.